Coming at you live from the beautiful heartland of these good old United States of America, right at the confluence of the mighty Mississippi and the majestic Missouri rivers, St. Charles, Missouri. This is The Rants. I am your host, Charles Lamson. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours. Today is Sunday, the Sabbath day, 9th day of February, in the year of our Lord, 2020. Today's big show, got a special treat for you, a little bit of something for everyone in the political spectrum. We're going to start off with the left wing. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you who are regular listeners, i.e. are also watchers on YouTube, will know that the first half of the show, I like to use my powers as a creepy occultist necromancer to summon forth spirits of great men from the past to somehow help us in these great times of political uncertainty and turmoil. And today is no exception. I'm really pleased to announce that today we're going to be summoning the spirit of definitely one of the most influential but also infamous economists of all time. That's right, Karl Marx. Karl Marx. I'm going to be summoning his spirit, and he's going to show up in the studio here, and he's going to talk about his Das Kapital. So you guys won't, so while I'm doing that, as my sacrifice, I'm going to be in this crazy, creepy ritual I'm doing. I'm going to, as my sacrifice, I'm going to be lifting weights over here. Not quite sure how well it's going to go. I'm feeling kind of weird and sluggish today, a little dizzy. But you know what? Hey, the show must go on, right? So anyway, it's going to be some motivational, inspirational, fitness instructional video for 50-year-old white male cripples. Okay, and let's see here. So then we're going to be doing that in the first half. I'm going to close the first half with a banishing ritual. We're going to send Karl Marx's spirit straight back to hell, where he belongs, and then we're going to move over, to the right, a little bit more of the right side of the political spectrum. I guess not really. I mean, in a communist system, they have to have management as well. So it's, this notion of management, business management, is not exactly. Well, let's just say the capitalists don't have a monopoly on the study of behavioral sciences, management, and whatnot. So I'm trying to mash it all together into a little thing I like to call Managing for Competitive Advantage, a Marxist Perspective, Part 1. Okay, so without further ado, let's see here. Karl, are you there? Please speak with us. Share with us your critical analysis of capitalist production. Are you there, Karl?
Kapital by Karl Marx, Volume 1, Editor's Preface to the English edition, 1886. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Kapital by Karl Marx, Volume 1, Editor's Preface to the English edition, 1886. The publication of an English version of Das Kapital needs no apology. On the contrary, an explanation might be expected why this English version has been delayed until now, seeing that for some years past, the theories advocated in this book have been constantly referred to, attacked and defended, interpreted and misinterpreted in the periodical press and the current literature of both England and America. When, soon after the author's death in 1883, it became evident that an English edition of the work was really required, Mr. Samuel Moore, for many years a friend of Marx and of the presenter, and than whom perhaps no one is more conversant with the book itself, consented to undertake the translation which the literary executors of Marx were anxious to lay before the public. It was understood that I should compare the manuscript with the original work and suggest such alterations as I might deem advisable. When, by and by, it was found that Mr. Moore's professional occupations prevented him from finishing the translation as quickly as we all desired, we gladly accepted Dr. Avelin's offer to undertake a portion of the work. At the same time, Mrs. Avelin, Marx's youngest daughter, offered to check the quotations and to restore the original text of the numerous passages taken from English authors and blue books and translated by Marx into German. This has been done throughout, with but a few unavoidable exceptions. The following portions of the book have been translated by Dr. Avelin. 1. Chapters 10, The Working Day, and 11, Rate and Mass of Surplus Value. 2. Part 6, Wages, comprising chapters 19 to 22. 3. From chapter 24, section 4, Circumstance that, etc., to the end of the book, comprising the latter part of chapter 24, chapter 25, and the whole of part 8, chapters 26 to 33. 4. The two authors' prefaces. All the rest of the book has been done by Mr. Moore. While thus each of the translators is responsible for his share of the work only, I bear a joint responsibility for the whole. The third German edition, which has been made the basis of our work throughout, was prepared by me in 1883, with the assistance of notes left by the author, indicating the passages of the second edition to be replaced by designated passages from the French text published in 1873. Footnote. Le Kapital, par Karl Marx. Traduction de M. Roy, entièrement révisée par leur
Whoa, wait a minute.
La Charte. This translation, especially the latter part of the book, contains considerable alterations in and additions to the text of the second German edition. End footnote. The alterations thus affected in the text of the second edition generally coincided with the changes prescribed by Marx in a set of manuscript instructions for an English translation that was planned about 10 years ago in America, but abandoned chiefly for want of a fit and proper translator. This manuscript was placed at our disposal by our old friend, Mr. F.A. Sorge, of Hoboken, New Jersey. It designates some further interpolations from the French edition, but being so many years older than the final instructions for the third edition, I did not consider myself at liberty to make use of it otherwise than sparingly, and chiefly in cases where it helped us over difficulties. In the same way, the French text has been referred to in most of the difficult passages as an indicator of what the author himself was prepared to sacrifice, wherever something of the full import of the original had to be sacrificed in the rendering. There is, however, one difficulty we could not spare the reader: the use of certain terms in a sense different from what they have, not only in common life, but in ordinary political economy. But this was unavoidable. Every new aspect of a science involves a revolution in the technical terms of that science. This is best shown by chemistry, where the whole of the terminology is radically changed about once in 20 years, and where you will hardly find a single organic compound that has not gone through a series of different names. Political economy has generally been content to take, just as they were, the terms of commercial and industrial life, and to operate with them, entirely failing to see that by so doing, it confined itself within the narrow circles of ideas expressed by those terms. Thus, though perfectly aware that both profits and rent are but subdivisions, fragments of that unpaid part of the product which the labourer has to supply to his employer, its first appropriator, though not its ultimate exclusive owner, yet even classic political economy never went beyond the received notions of profits and rents, never examined this unpaid part of the product, called by Marx surplus product, in its integrity as a whole, and therefore never arrived at a clear comprehension either of its origin and nature, or of the laws that regulate the subsequent distribution of its value. Similarly, all industry, not agricultural or handicraft, is indiscriminately comprised in the term of manufacture, and thereby the distinction is obliterated between two great and essentially different periods of economic history: the period of manufacture proper, based on the division of manual labour, and the period of modern industry, based on machinery. It is, however, self-evident that a theory which views modern capitalist production as a mere passing stage in the economic history of mankind must make use of terms different from those habitual to writers who look upon that form of production as imperishable and final. A word respecting the author's method of quoting may not be out of place. In the majority of cases, the quotations serve, in the usual way, as documentary evidence in support of assertions made in the text. But in many instances, passages from economic writers are quoted in order to indicate when, where, and by whom a certain proposition was for the first time clearly enunciated. This is done in cases where the proposition quoted is of importance as being a more or less adequate expression of the conditions of social production and exchange prevalent at the time, and quite irrespective of Marx's recognition or otherwise of its general validity. These quotations, therefore, supplement the text by a running commentary taken from the history of the science. Our translation comprises the first book of the work only, but this first book is in a great measure a whole in itself, and has for 20 years ranked as an independent work. The second book, edited in German by me in 1885, is decidedly incomplete without the third, which cannot be published before the end of 1887. When Book 3 has been brought out in the original German, it will then be soon enough to think about preparing an English edition of both. Das Kapital is often called on the continent the Bible of the working class. That the conclusions arrived at in this work are daily more and more becoming the fundamental principles of the great working class movement, not only in Germany and Switzerland, but in France, in Holland and Belgium, in America, and even in Italy and Spain, that everywhere the working class more and more recognises in these conclusions the most adequate expression of its condition and of its aspirations, nobody acquainted with that movement will deny. And in England too, the theories of Marx, even at this moment, exercise a powerful influence upon the socialist movement, which is spreading in the ranks of cultured people no less than in those of the working class. But that is not all. The time is rapidly approaching when a thorough examination of England's economic position will impose itself as an irresistible national necessity. The working of the industrial system of this country, impossible without a constant and rapid extension of production, and therefore of markets, is coming to a dead stop. Free trade has exhausted its resources. Even Manchester doubts this, its quondam economic gospel. Footnote. At the quarterly meeting of the Manchester Chamber of Commerce, held this afternoon, a warm discussion took place on the subject of free trade. A resolution was moved to the effect that, quote, having waited in vain 40 years for other nations to follow the free trade example of England, this chamber thinks the time has now arrived to reconsider that position, end quote. The resolution was rejected by a majority of only one, the figures being 21 for and 22 against. Evening Standard, November the 1st, 1886. End footnote. Foreign industry, rapidly developing, stares English production in the face everywhere, not only in protected, but also in neutral markets, and even on this side of the Channel. While the productive power increases in a geometric, the extension of markets proceeds at best in an arithmetic ratio. The decennial cycle of stagnation, prosperity, overproduction, and crisis, ever recurrent from 1825 to 1867, seems indeed to have run its course, but only to land us in the slough of despond of a permanent and chronic depression. The sighed-for period of prosperity will not come. As often as we seem to perceive its heralding symptoms, so often do they again vanish into air. Meanwhile, each succeeding winter brings up afresh the great question, what to do with the unemployed. But while the number of the unemployed keeps swelling from year to year, there is nobody to answer that question, and we can almost calculate the moment when the unemployed, losing patience, will take their own fate into their own hands. Surely, at such a moment, the voice ought to be heard of a man whose whole theory is the result of a lifelong study of the economic history and condition of England, and whom that study led to the conclusion that, at least in Europe, England is the only country where the inevitable social revolution might be effected entirely by peaceful and legal means. He certainly never forgot to add that he hardly expected the English ruling classes to submit, without a pro-slavery rebellion, to this peaceful and legal revolution. Frederick Engels, November the 5th, 1886. End of editor's preface. Read by Karl Marx, 2007. Kapital, Volume 1 by Karl Marx. Preface to the first German edition. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Karl Marx, 2007. Kapital, Volume 1 by Karl Marx. Preface to the first German edition, 1867. The work, the first volume of which I now submit to the public, forms the continuation of my Zur Kritik der Politischen Ökonomie, a contribution to the criticism of political economy, published in 1859. The long pause between the first part and the continuation is due to an illness of many years' duration that again and again interrupted my work. The substance of that earlier work is summarized in the first 3 chapters of this volume. This is not done merely for the sake of connection and completeness. The presentation of the subject matter is improved. As far as circumstances in any way permit, many points only hinted at in the earlier book are here worked out more fully, whilst conversely, points worked out fully there are only touched upon in this volume. The sections on the history of the theories of value and of money are now, of course, left out altogether. The reader of the earlier work will find, however, in the notes to the first chapter, additional sources of reference relative to the history of those theories. Every beginning is difficult, holds in all sciences. To understand the first chapter, especially the section that contains the analysis of commodities, will therefore present the greatest difficulty. That which concerns more especially the analysis of the substance of value and the magnitude of value I have, as much as it was possible, popularized. Footnote. This is the more necessary, as even the section of Ferdinand Lassalle's work against Schulze de Leech, in which he professes to give the intellectual quintessence of my explanations on these subjects, contains important mistakes. If Ferdinand Lassalle has borrowed almost literally from my writings, and without any acknowledgement, all the general theoretical propositions in his economic works, e.g. those on the historical character of capital, on the connection between the conditions of production and the mode of production, etc., etc., even to the terminology created by me, this may perhaps be due to purposes of propaganda. I am here, of course, not speaking of his detailed working out and application of these propositions, with which I have nothing to do. End footnote. The value form, whose fully developed shape is the money form, is very elementary and simple. Nonetheless, the human mind has for more than 2,000 years sought in vain to get to the bottom of it all, whilst, on the other hand, to the successful analysis of much more composite and complex forms, there has been at least an approximation. Why? Because the body, as an organic whole, is more easy of study than other cells of the body. In the analysis of economic forms, moreover, neither microscopes nor chemical reagents are of use. The force of abstraction must replace both. But in bourgeois society, the commodity form of the product of labour, or value form of the commodity, is the economic cell form. To the superficial observer, the analysis of these forms seems to turn upon minutiae. It does in fact deal with minutiae, but they are of the same order as those dealt with in microscopic anatomy. With the exception of the section of value form, therefore, this volume cannot stand accused on the score of difficulty. I presuppose, of course, a reader who is willing to learn something new and therefore to think for himself. The physicist either observes physical phenomena where they occur in their most typical form and most free from disturbing influence, or, wherever possible, he makes experiments under conditions that assure the occurrence of the phenomena in its normality. In this work, I have to examine the capitalist mode of production and the conditions of production and exchange corresponding to that mode. Up to the present time, their classic ground is England. That is the reason why England is used as the chief illustration in the development of my theoretical ideas. If, however, the German reader shrugs his shoulders at the condition of the English industrial and agricultural labourers, or, in optimist fashion, comforts himself with the thought that in Germany things are not nearly so bad, I must plainly tell him De te fabula narratur. It is of you that the story is told. Horace. Intrinsically, it is not a question of the higher or lower degree of development of the social antagonisms that result from the natural laws of capitalist production. It is a question of these laws themselves, of these tendencies working with iron necessity towards inevitable results. The country that is more developed industrially only shows to the less developed the image of its own future. But apart from this, where capitalist production is fully naturalized among the Germans, for instance in the factories proper, the condition of things is much worse than in England, because the counterpoise of the Factory Acts is wanting. In all other spheres, we, like the rest of continental Western Europe, suffer not only from the development of capitalist production, but also from the incompleteness of that development. Alongside the modern evils, a whole series of inherited evils oppress us, arising from the passive survival of antiquated modes of production, with their inevitable train of social and political anachronisms. We suffer not only from the living, but from the dead. Le mort saisit le vif. The dead holds the living in his grasp. Formula of French common law. The social statistics of Germany and the rest of continental Western Europe are, in comparison with those of England, wretchedly compiled. But they raise the veil just enough to let us catch a glimpse of the Medusa head behind it. We should be appalled at the state of things at home if, as in England, our governments and parliaments appointed periodically commissions of inquiry into economic conditions, if these commissions were armed with the same plenary powers to get at the truth, if it were possible to find for this purpose men as competent, as free from partisanship and respect of persons as are the English factory inspectors, the medical reporters on public health, the commissioners of inquiry into the exploitation of women and children, into housing and food. Perseus wore a magic cap down over his eyes and ears as a make-believe that there are no monsters. Let us not deceive ourselves on this. As in the 18th century, the American War of Independence sounded the tocsin for the European middle class, so that in the 19th century, the American Civil War sounded it for the European working class. In England, the process of social disintegration is palpable. When it has reached a certain point, it must react on the continent. There it will take a form more brutal or more humane, according to the degree of development of the working class itself. Apart from higher motives, therefore, their own most important interests dictate to the classes that are for the nonce the ruling ones, the removal of all legally removable hindrances to the free development of the working class. For this reason, as well as others, I have given so large a space in this volume to the history, the details, and the results of English factory legislation. One nation can and should learn from others, and even when a society has got upon the right track for the discovery of the natural laws of its movement, and it is the ultimate aim of this work to lay bare the economic law of motion of modern society, it can neither clear by bold leaps, nor remove by legal enactments the obstacles offered by the successive phases of its normal development, but it can shorten and lessen the birth pangs. To prevent possible misunderstandings, a word. I paint the capitalist and the landlord in no sense couleur de rose, i.e. seen through rose-tinted glasses, but here individuals are dealt with only insofar as they are the personifications of economic categories, embodiments of particular class relations and class interests. My standpoint, from which the evolution of the economic formation of society is viewed as a process of natural history, can, less than any other, make the individual responsible for relations whose creature he socially remains, however much he may subjectively raise himself above them. In the domain of political economy, free scientific inquiry meets not merely the same enemies as in all other domains. The peculiar nature of the materials it deals with summons as foes into the field of battle the most violent, mean, and malignant passions of the human breast, the furies of private interest. The English established church, for example, will more readily pardon an attack on 38 of its 39 articles than on 1/39 of its income. Nowadays, atheism is culpa levis, a relatively slight sin, contrasted with mortal sin, as compared with criticism of existing property relations. Nevertheless, there is an unmistakable advance. I refer, for example, to the Blue Book published within the last few weeks, correspondence with Her Majesty's missions abroad regarding industrial questions and trades unions, the representatives of the English Crown in foreign countries, there declare in so many words that in Germany, in France, to be brief, in all the civilized states of the European continent, radical change in the existing relations between capital and labour is as evident and inevitable as in England. At the same time, on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, Mr. Wade, Vice President of the United States, declared in public meetings that after the abolition of slavery, a radical change of the relations of capital and of property in land is next upon the order of the day. These are signs of the times, not to be hidden by purple mantles or black castles. They do not signify that tomorrow a miracle will happen. They show that, within the ruling classes themselves, a foreboding is dawning, that the present society is no solid crystal, but an organism capable of change, and is constantly changing. The second volume of this book will treat of the process of the circulation of capital, Book 2, and of the varied forms assumed by capital in the course of its development, Book 3. The third and last volume, Book 4, the history of the theory. Every opinion based on scientific criticism I welcome. As to prejudices of so-called public opinion, to which I have never made concessions, now as aforetime, the maxim of the great Florentine is mine. Segui il tuo corso e lascia dire il gente. Follow your own course and let people talk. Paraphrased from Dante. Karl Marx, London, July the 25th, 1867. End of the preface to the first German edition. Read by Karl Manchester, 2007.
Whew. Karl Manchester.
Kapital by Karl Marx. Afterward to the second edition, 1873. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Karl Manchester, 2007. Kapital by Karl Marx. Afterward to the second edition, 1873. To the present moment, political economy in Germany is a foreign science. Gustav von Gulick, in his historical description of commerce, industry, etc., especially in the two first volumes published in 1830, has examined at length the historical circumstances that prevented, in Germany, the development of the capitalist mode of production, and consequently the development in that country of modern bourgeois society. Thus, the soil whence political economy springs was wanting. This science had to be imported from England and France as a ready-made article. Its German professors remained schoolboys. The theoretical expression of a foreign reality was turned in their hands into a collection of dogmas, interpreted by them in terms of the petty trading world around them, and therefore misinterpreted. The feeling of scientific impotence, a feeling not wholly to be repressed, and the uneasy consciousness of having to touch on a subject in reality foreign to them, was but imperfectly concealed, either under a parade of literary and historical erudition, or by an admixture of extraneous material, borrowed from the so-called Kameral sciences, a medley of smatterings, through whose purgatory the hopeless candidate for the German bureaucracy has to pass. Since 1848, capitalist production has developed rapidly in Germany, and at the present time it is in the full bloom of speculation and swindling. But fate is still unpropitious to our professional economists. At the time when they were able to deal with political economy in a straightforward fashion, modern economic conditions did not actually exist in Germany. And as soon as these conditions did come into existence, they did so under circumstances that no longer allowed of their being really and impartially investigated within the bounds of the bourgeois horizon, insofar, i.e., as the capitalist regime is looked upon as the absolutely final form of social production, instead of as a passing historical phase of its evolution. Political economy can remain science only so long as the class struggle is latent or manifests itself only in isolated and sporadic phenomena. Let us take England. Its political economy belongs to the period in which the class struggle was as yet undeveloped. Its last great representative, Ricardo, in the end, consciously makes the antagonism of class interests, of wages and profits, of profits and rent, the starting point of his investigations, naively taking this antagonism for a social law of nature. But by this start, the science of bourgeois economy had reached the limits beyond which it could not pass. Already in the lifetime of Ricardo, and in opposition to him, it was met by criticism, in the person of Sismondi. Footnote: see my work, Zur Kritik, etc., page 39. End footnote. The succeeding period, from 1820 to 1830, was notable in England for scientific activity in the domain of political economy. It was the time, as well as the vulgarising and extending of Ricardo's theory, as to the contest of that theory with the old school. Splendid tournaments were held. What was done then is little known to the continent generally, because the polemic is for the most part scattered through articles in reviews, occasional literature and pamphlets. The unprejudiced character of this polemic, although the theory of Ricardo already serves, in exceptional cases, as a weapon of attack upon bourgeois economy, is explained by the circumstances of the time. On the one hand, modern industry itself was only just emerging from the age of childhood, as is shown by the fact that with the crisis of 1825, it for the first time opens the periodic cycle of its modern life. On the other hand, the class struggle between capital and labour is forced into the background, politically by the discord between the governments and the feudal aristocracy gathered around the Holy Alliance on the one hand, and the popular masses, led by the bourgeoisie, on the other. Economically, by the quarrel between industrial capital and aristocratic landed property, a quarrel that in France was concealed by the opposition between small and large landed property, and that in England broke out openly after the Corn Laws. The literature of political economy in England at this time calls to mind the stormy forward movement in France after Dr. Quesnay's death, but only as the St. Martin's summer reminds us of spring. With the year 1830 came the decisive crisis. In France and in England, the bourgeoisie had conquered political power. Thenceforth, the class struggle, practically as well as theoretically, took on more and more outspoken and threatening forms. I sounded the knell of scientific bourgeois economy. It was thenceforth no longer a question whether this theorem or that was true, but whether it was useful to capital or harmful, expedient or inexpedient, politically dangerous or not. In place of disinterested inquirers, there were hired prize fighters. In place of genuine scientific research, the bad conscience and the evil intent of apologetic. Still, even the obtrusive pamphlets with which the Anti-Corn Law League, led by the manufacturers Cobham and Bright, deluged the world, have a historic interest, if no scientific one, on account of their polemic against the landed aristocracy. But since then, the free trade legislation, inaugurated by Sir Robert Peel, has deprived vulgar economy of this its last sting. The Continental Revolution of 1848-9 also had its reaction in England. Men who still claimed some scientific standing and aspired to be something more than mere sophists and sycophants, the ruling classes, tried to harmonise the political economy of capital with the claims, no longer to be ignored, of the proletariat, hence a shallow syncretism of which John Stuart Mill is the best representative. It is a declaration of bankruptcy by bourgeois economy, an event on which the great Russian scholar and critic, N. Chernyshevsky, has thrown the light of a mastermind in his Outlines of Political Economy according to Mill. In Germany, therefore, the capitalist mode of production came to a head after its antagonistic character had already in France and England shown itself in a fierce strife of classes. And meanwhile, moreover, the German proletariat had attained a much more clear class consciousness than the German bourgeoisie. Thus, at the very moment when a bourgeois science of political economy seemed at last possible in Germany, it had in reality become impossible. Under these circumstances, its professors fell into two groups. The one set, prudent, practical business folk, flocked to the banner of Bastiat, the most superficial and therefore the most adequate representative of the apologetic of vulgar economy. The other, proud of the professional dignity of their science, followed John Stuart Mill in his attempt to reconcile irreconcilables. Just as in the classical time of bourgeois economy, so also in the time of its decline, the Germans remained mere schoolboys, imitators and followers, petty retailers and hawkers, in the service of the great foreign wholesale concern. The peculiar historic development of German society, therefore, forbids in that country all the original work in bourgeois economy, but not the criticism of that economy. So far as such criticism represents a class, it can only represent the class whose vocation in history is the overthrow of the capitalist mode of production and the final abolition of all classes, the proletariat. The learned and unlearned spokesmen of the German bourgeoisie tried at first to kill Das Kapital by silence, as they had managed to do with my earlier writings. As soon as they found that these tactics no longer fitted the conditions of the time, they wrote, under pretense of criticising my book, descriptions, quote, for the tranquilization of the bourgeois mind, end quote. But they found in the workers' press, see, for example, Joseph Dietzken's articles in the Volksstaat, antagonists stronger than themselves to whom, down to this very day, they owe a reply. Footnote: the mealy-mouthed babblers of German vulgar economy fell foul of the style of my book. No one can feel the literary shortcomings in Das Kapital more strongly than I myself, yet I will, for the benefit and enjoyment of these gentlemen and their public, quote in this connection one English and one Russian notice. The Saturday Review, always hostile to my views, said in its notice of the first edition, quote, the presentation of the subject invests the driest economic questions with a certain peculiar charm, end quote. The St. Petersburg Journal, Sankt Petersburgsky Vedomosti, in its issue of April 20th, 1872, says, quote, the presentation of the subject, with the exception of one or two exceptionally special parts, is distinguished by its comprehensibility by the general reader, its clearness, and, in spite of the scientific intricacy of the subject, by an unusual liveliness. In this respect, the author in no way resembles the majority of German scholars who write their books in a language so dry and obscure that the heads of ordinary mortals are cracked by it. End quote. End footnote. An excellent Russian translation of Das Kapital appeared in the spring of 1872. The edition of 3,000 copies is already nearly exhausted. As early as 1871, A. Sierba, professor of political economy in the University of Kiev, in his work David Ricardo's Theory of Value and of Capital, referred to my theory of value, of money and of capital, as in its fundamentals a necessary sequel to the teaching of Smith and Ricardo. That which astonishes the Western European in the reading of this excellent work is the author's consistent and firm grasp of the purely theoretical position. That the method employed in Das Kapital has been little understood is shown by the various conceptions, contradictory one to another, that have been formed of it. Thus the Paris Revue Positiviste reproaches me in that, on the one hand, I treat economics metaphysically, and on the other hand, confine myself to the mere critical analysis of actual facts, instead of writing receipts, comtist ones, for the cookshops of the future. In answer to the reproach in Ray Metaphysics, Professor Sierba has it, quote, insofar as it deals with actual theory, the method of Marx is the deductive method of the whole English school, a school whose failings and virtues are common to the best theoretical economists, end quote. Monsieur Bloch, le théoricien du socialisme en Allemagne, extrait du Journal des économistes, juillet et août 1872, makes the discovery that my method is analytic and says, quote, par cet ouvrage, Monsieur Marx se classe parmi les esprits analytiques les plus éminents, end quote. With this work, Mr. Marx puts himself among the most eminent of analytical minds. German reviews, of course, shriek out at Hegelian sophistics. The European Messenger of St. Petersburg, in an article dealing exclusively with the method of Das Kapital, May number 1872, pages 427 to 436, finds my method of inquiry severely realistic, but my method of presentation, unfortunately, German dialectical. It says, quote, "At first sight, if the judgment is based on the external form of the presentation of the subject, Marx is the most ideal of ideal philosophers, always in the German, i.e., the bad sense of the word. But in point of fact, he is infinitely more realistic than all his forerunners in the work of economic criticism. He can in no sense be called an idealist." End quote. I cannot answer the writer better than by aid of a few extracts from his own criticism, which may interest some of my readers, to whom the Russian original is inaccessible. After a quotation from the preface to my Criticism of Political Economy, Berlin 1859, pages 4 to 7, where I discuss the materialistic basis of my method, the writer goes on, quote, "The one thing which is of moment to Marx is to find the laws of the phenomena with whose investigation he is concerned. And not only is that law of moment to him which governs these phenomena, insofar as they have a definite form and mutual connection within a given historical period, a still greater moment to him is the law of their variation, of their development, i.e., of their transition from one into another, from one series of connections into a different one. This law once discovered, he investigates in detail the effects in which it manifests itself in social life. Consequently, Marx only troubles himself about one thing, to show by rigid scientific investigation the necessity of successive determinate orders of social conditions, and to establish, as impartially as possible, the facts that serve him for fundamental starting points. For this is quite enough if he proves at the same time both the necessity of another order into which the first must inevitably pass over, and this all the same, whether men believe or do not believe it, whether they are conscious or unconscious of it. Marx treats the social movement as a process of natural history, governed by laws not only independent of human will, consciousness, and intelligence, but rather, on the contrary, determining that will, consciousness, and intelligence. If in the history of civilization the conscious element plays a part so subordinate, then it is self-evident that a critical inquiry whose subject matter is civilization can, less than anything else, have for its basis any form of, or any result of, consciousness. That is to say, that not the idea but the material phenomena alone can serve as its starting point. Such an inquiry will confine itself to the confrontation and the comparison of a fact, not with ideas, but with another fact. For this inquiry, the one thing of moment is that both facts can be investigated as accurately as possible, and that they actually form, each with respect to the other, different momenta of an evolution. But most important of all is the rigid analysis of the series of successions, of the sequences and concatenations in which the different stages of such an evolution present themselves. But it will be said, the general laws of economic life are one and the same, no matter whether they are applied to the present or the past. This Marx directly denies. According to him, such abstract laws do not exist. On the contrary, in his opinion, every historical period has laws of its own. As soon as society has outlived a given period of development and is passing over from one given stage to another, it begins to be subject also to other laws. In a word, economic life offers us a phenomenon analogous to the history of evolution on other branches of biology. The old economists misunderstood the nature of economic laws when they likened them to the laws of physics and chemistry. A more thorough analysis of phenomena shows that social organisms differ among themselves as fundamentally as plants or animals. Nay, one and the same phenomenon falls under quite different laws in consequence of the different structure of those organisms as a whole, of the variations of their individual organs, of the different conditions in which those organs function, etc. Marx, for example, denies that the law of population is the same at all times and in all places, he asserts, on the contrary, that every stage of development has its own law of population. With the varying degree of development of productive power, social conditions and the laws governing them vary too. Whilst Marx sets himself the task of following and explaining from this point of view the economic system established by the sway of capital, he is only formulating in a strictly scientific manner the aim that every accurate investigation into economic life must have. The scientific value of such an inquiry lies in the disclosing of the special laws that regulate the origin, existence, development, death of a given social organism, and its replacement by another and higher one. And it is this value that, in point of fact, Marx's book has. End quote. Whilst the writer pictures what he takes to be actually my method in this striking and, as far as concerns my own application of it, generous way, what else is he picturing but the dialectic method? Of course, the method of presentation must differ in form from that of inquiry. The latter has to appropriate the material in detail, to analyse its different forms of development, to trace out their inner connection. Only after this work is done can the actual movement be adequately described. If this is done successfully, if the life of the subject matter is ideally reflected as in a mirror, then it may appear as if we had before us a mere a priori construction. My dialectical method is not only different from the Hegelian, but is its direct opposite. To Hegel, the life process of the human brain, i.e. the process of thinking which, under the name of the idea, he even transforms into an independent subject, is the demiurgus of the real world, and the real world is only the external phenomenal form of the idea. With me, on the contrary, the ideal is nothing else than the material world reflected by the human mind and translated into forms of thought. The mystifying side of Hegelian dialectic I criticised nearly 30 years ago, at a time when it was still the fashion. But just as I was working at the first volume of Das Kapital, it was the good pleasure of the peevish, arrogant, mediocre epigonoi who now talk large in cultured Germany to treat Hegel in the same way as the brave Moses Mendelssohn in Lessing's time treated Spinoza, i.e. as a dead dog. I therefore openly avowed myself the pupil of that mighty thinker, and even here and there, in the chapter on the theory of value, coquetted with the modes of expression peculiar to him. The mystification which dialectic suffers in Hegel's hands by no means prevents him from being the first to present its general form of working in a comprehensive and conscious manner. With him it is standing on its head. It must be turned right side up again if you would discover the rational kernel within the mystical shell. In its mystified form, dialectic became the fashion in Germany because it seemed to transfigure and to glorify the existing state of things. In its rational form, it is a scandal and abomination to bourgeoisdom and its doctrinaire professors, because it includes in its comprehension an affirmative recognition of the existing state of things, at the same time also the recognition of the negation of that state, of its inevitable breaking up, because it regards every historically developed social form as in fluid movement, and therefore takes into account its transient nature not less than its momentary existence, because it lets nothing impose upon it, and is in its essence critical and revolutionary. The contradictions inherent in the movement of capitalist society impress themselves upon the practical bourgeois most strikingly in the changes of the periodic cycle through which modern industry runs, and whose crowning point is the universal crisis. That crisis is once again approaching, although as yet but in its preliminary stage, and by the universality of its theatre and the intensity of its action, it will drum dialectics even into the heads of the mushroom upstarts of the new, wholly Prusso-Germanic Empire. Karl Marx, London, January 24th, 1873. End of afterword. Chapter 1, Section 1 of Kapital, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Kapital, Volume 1 by Karl Marx. Chapter 1, Section 1. The two factors of a commodity, use value and value, the substance of value and the magnitude of value. The wealth of those societies in which the capitalist mode of production prevails presents itself as, quote, an immense accumulation of commodities, end quote. Footnote, Karl Marx, Zur Kritik der politischen Ökonomie, Berlin, 1859, page 3, end footnote. Its unit being a single commodity. Our investigation must therefore begin with the analysis of a commodity. A commodity is, in the first place, an object outside us, a thing that by its properties satisfies human wants of some sort or another. The nature of such wants, whether, for instance, they spring from the stomach or from fancy, makes no difference. Footnote, quote, desire implies want. It is the appetite of the mind, and as natural as hunger to the body. The greatest number of things have their value from supplying the wants of the mind. End quote. Nicholas Barban, A Discourse Concerning Coining the New Money Lighter in Answer to Mr. Locke's Considerations, etc., London, 1696. End footnote. Neither are we here concerned to know how the object satisfies these wants, whether directly as means of subsistence or indirectly as means of production. Every useful thing, as iron, paper, etc., may be looked at from the 2 points of view of quality and quantity. It is an assemblage of many properties and may therefore be of use in various ways. To discover the various uses of things is the work of history. Footnote, quote, things have an intrinsic value, end quote. This is Barban's special term for value in use, quote, which in all places have the same virtue as the lodestone to attract iron, end quote. The property which the magnet possesses of attracting iron became of use only after, by means of that property, the polarity of the magnet had been discovered. End footnote. So also is the establishment of socially recognized standards of measure for the quantities of these useful objects. The diversity of these measures has its origin partly in the diverse nature of the objects to be measured, partly in convention. The utility of a thing makes it a use value. Footnote, quote, the natural worth of anything consists in its fitness to supply the necessities or serve the conveniences of human life, end quote. John Locke, Some Considerations on the Consequences of the Lowering of Interest, 1691. In English writers of the 17th century, we frequently find worth in the sense of value in use and value in the sense of exchange value. This is quite in accordance with the spirit of a language that likes to use a Teutonic word for the actual thing and a Romance word for its reflection. End footnote. But this utility is not a thing of air. Being limited by the physical properties of the commodity, it has no existence apart from that commodity. A commodity such as iron, corn, or a diamond is therefore, so far as it is a material thing, a use value, something useful. This property of a commodity is independent of the amount of labour required to appropriate its useful qualities. When treating of use value, we always assume to be dealing with definite quantities, such as dozens of watches, yards of linen, or tons of iron. The use values of commodities furnish the material for a special study, that of the commercial knowledge of commodities. Footnote. In bourgeois societies, the economic fictio juris prevails that everyone, as a buyer, possesses an encyclopedic knowledge of commodities. End footnote. Use values become a reality only by use or consumption. They also constitute the substance of all wealth, whatever may be the social form of that wealth. In the form of society we are about to consider, they are, in addition, the material depositories of exchange value. Exchange value, at first sight, presents itself as a quantitative relation, as the proportion in which values in use of one sort are exchanged for those of another sort. Footnote. Quote, la valeur consiste dans le rapport d'échange qui se trouve entre telle chose et telle autre entre telle mesure de production et telle mesure d'une autre. End quote. Value consists in the exchange relation between one thing and another, between a given amount of one product and a given amount of another. Le Troisième, de l'intérêt social, Physiocrate, Paris, 1846. End footnote. A relation constantly changing with time and place. Hence, exchange value appears to be something accidental and purely relative, and consequently an intrinsic value, i.e. an exchange value that is inseparably connected with, inherent in commodities, seems a contradiction in terms. Footnote. Quote, nothing can have an intrinsic value. Nicholas Barber, or as Butler says, quote, the value of a thing is just as much as it will bring. End quote. Let us consider the matter a little more closely. A given commodity, for example, a quarter of wheat, is exchanged for X blacking, Y silk, or Z gold, etc. In short, for other commodities in the most different proportions. Instead of one exchange value, the wheat has, therefore, a great many. But since X blacking, Y silk, or Z gold, etc., each represents the exchange value of 1/4 of wheat, X blacking, Y silk, Z gold, etc., must, as exchange values, be replaceable by each other or equal to each other. Therefore, first, the valid exchange values of a given commodity express something equal. Secondly, exchange value, generally, is only the mode of expression, the phenomenal form of something contained in it, yet distinguishable from it. Let us take two commodities. For example, corn and iron. The proportions in which they are exchangeable, whatever those proportions may be, can always be represented by an equation in which a given quantity of corn is equated to some quantity of iron. For example, 1/4 corn equals X hundredweight of iron. What does this equation tell us? It tells us that in two different things, in 1/4 of corn and in X hundredweight of iron, there exists in equal quantities something common to both. The two things must therefore be equal to a third, which in itself is neither the one nor the other. Each of them, so far as it is exchange value, must therefore be reducible to this third. A simple geometrical illustration will make this clear. In order to calculate and compare the areas of rectilinear figures, we decompose them into triangles. But the area of the triangle itself is expressed by something totally different from its visible figure, namely, by half the product of the base multiplied by the altitude. In the same way, the exchange values of commodities must be capable of being expressed in terms of something common to them all, of which thing they represent a greater or less quantity. This common something cannot be either a geometrical, a chemical, or any other natural property of commodities. Such properties claim our attention only insofar as they affect the utility of those commodities, make them use values. But the exchange of commodities is evidently an act characterized by a total abstraction from use value. Then one use value is just as good as another, provided only it be present in sufficient quantity, or, as old Barben says, quote, one sort of wares are as good as another, if the values be equal. There is no difference or distinction in things of equal value. £100 worth of lead or iron is of as great value as £100 worth of silver or gold. End quote. As use values, commodities are above all of different qualities, but as exchange values, they are merely different quantities, and consequently do not contain an atom of use value. If we then leave out of consideration the use value of commodities, they have only one common property left, that of being products of labour. But even the product of labour itself has undergone a change in our hands. If we make abstraction from its use value, we make abstraction at the same time from the material elements and shapes that make the product a use value. We see in it no longer a table, a house, yarn, or any other useful thing. Its existence as a material thing is put out of sight. Neither can it any longer be regarded as the product of the labour of the joiner, the mason, the spinner, or of any other definite kind of productive labour. Along with the useful qualities of the products themselves, we put out of sight both the useful character of the various kinds of labour embodied in them and the concrete forms of that labour. There is nothing left but what is common to them all. All are reduced to one and the same sort of labour, human labour, in the abstract. Let us now consider the residue of each of these products. It consists of the same unsubstantial reality in each, a mere congelation of homogeneous human labour, of labour power expended without regard to the mode of its expenditure. All that these things now tell us is that human labour power has been expended in their production, that human labour is embodied in them. When looked at as crystals of this social substance, common to them all, they are values. We have seen that when commodities are exchanged, their exchange value manifests itself as something totally independent of their use value. But if we abstract from their use value, there remains their value as defined above. Therefore, the common substance that manifests itself in the exchange value of commodities, whenever they are exchanged, is their value. The progress of our investigation will show that exchange value is the only form in which the value of commodities can manifest itself or be expressed. For the present, however, we have to consider the nature of value independently of this, its form. A use value, or useful article, therefore has value only because human labour, in the abstract, has been embodied or materialised in it. How, then, is the magnitude of this value to be measured? Plainly, by the quantity of the value-creating substance, the labour, contained in the article. The quantity of labour, however, is measured by its duration, and labour time, in turn, finds its standard in weeks, days, and hours. Some people might think that if the value of a commodity is determined by the quantity of labour spent on it, the more idle and unskilful the labourer, the more valuable would his commodity be, because more time would be required in its production. The labour, however, that forms the substance of value is homogeneous human labour, expenditure of one uniform labour power. The total labour power of society, which is embodied in the sum total of the values of all commodities produced by that society, counts here as one homogeneous mass of human labour power, composed though it be of innumerable individual units. Each of these units is the same as any other, so far as it has the character of the average labour power of society, and takes effect as such, that is, so far as it requires for producing a commodity, no more time than is needed on an average, no more than is socially necessary. The labour time socially necessary is that required to produce an article under the normal conditions of production, and with the average degree of skill and intensity prevalent at the time. The introduction of power looms into England probably reduced by 1/2 the labour required to weave a given quantity of yarn into cloth. The hand loom weavers, as a matter of fact, continued to require the same time as before, but for all that, the product of 1 hour of their labour represented, after the change, only half an hour's social labour, and consequently fell to 1/2 of its former value. We see then that which determines the magnitude of the value of any article is the amount of labour socially necessary, or the labour time socially necessary for its production. Footnote, quote, the value of them, the necessities of life, when they are exchanged the one for another, is regulated by the quantity of labour necessarily required and commonly taken in producing them. End quote. Some thoughts on the interest of money in general, and particularly in the public funds, etc. This remarkable anonymous work, written in the last century, bears no date. It is clear, however, from internal evidence, that it appeared in the reign of George II, about 1739 or 1740. End footnote. Each individual commodity in this connection is to be considered as an average sample of its class. Footnote, quote, toutes les productions d'un même genre ne forment proprement qu'une masse dont le prix se détermine en général et sans égard aux circonstances particulières. End quote. Properly speaking, all products of the same kind form a single mass, and their price is determined in general and without regard to particular circumstances. The troisième. End footnote. Commodities, therefore, in which equal quantities of labour are embodied, or which can be produced in the same time, have the same value. The value of one commodity is
All
to the
right,
value
Carl.
of the other, as the labour
All
time
right.
necessary for the production of the one is to that necessary
They're
for
just
the
about enough
production
out
of
of
the
you.
other. Quote, as values, all commodities are only definite masses
That'll be just
which yield labour time.
about
End
enough
quote. Footnote.
of you.
Karl Marx, Zur Kritik der politischen
Yeah.
End footnote.
Yeah.
The value of a commodity would therefore.
Later, Carl. Karl Marx, ladies and gentlemen, talking at us live from the spirit realm. Okay, maybe not live, but you know what the hell I'm trying to say? Ow, just bit my lip. I gotta learn how to use my mouth one of these days. All right. So anyway, it's now it's time for the banishing ritual. I'm gonna banish Karl Marx's spirit from my apartment. Spirit, be gone! To hell with ye! Till I call ye forth again. All right. Anywho. All right, so moving on. We're talking about management tips. This is a mashup called Managing for Competitive Advantage, a Marxist perspective. I know here, in the States, more capitalist countries, we often associate management practices with more right-wing conservative ideas, but hey, management is good. Management skills are required in any kind of organization. It's organizational behavior. That's what we're talking about here. The behavioral sciences. So let's see here. All right. By the way, call-out lines are wide open. If you want to call in and be a part of the big show, please feel free. That number be 657-383-1825. That's 657-383-1825. You want to talk about Marxism? You want to talk about management tips? How management tips and strategies can be applied in a left-wing Marxist society? Or if you just want to talk about anything. I don't care. I'm here for you, ladies and gentlemen. I want to be your friend. I'm all about relationship marketing. I want to be your friend till we're both in the grave. I know, okay, that's a little creepy, but all right, moving on. Now, new ventures. First half of the show, we're talking, Karl Marx was talking all about his Marxist philosophy. It's going to be that's going to be how the opening part of the show here for at least the next 7 or 8 shows. But then the second half, we're going to make things a little bit more contemporary, and we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. Something people often associate with, right-wing conservative business ideals, but it's also to be, even in a communist Marxist society, innovation, entrepreneurship is an important thing. You have to be able to come up with new ideas to stay competitive with the other countries, right? Right. Okay, so let's talk about new ventures. Shall we? Great opportunity is available to those who develop a vitally important skill, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship occurs when an enterprising individual pursues a lucrative opportunity. To be an entrepreneur is to initiate and build an organization, rather than being only a passive part of one. It involves creating new systems, resources, or processes to produce new goods or services and or serve new markets. Entrepreneurship differs from management generally and from small business management in particular. An entrepreneur is a manager, but engages in additional activities that not all managers do. Whereas managers operate in a more formal management hierarchy with more clearly defined authority and responsibility, entrepreneurs use networks of contacts more than formal authority. And whereas managers usually prefer to own assets, entrepreneurs often rent or use assets on a temporary basis. Some say that managers often are slower to act and tend to avoid risk, whereas entrepreneurs are quicker to act and actively manage risk. How does entrepreneurship differ from managing a small business? A small business is often defined as having fewer than 100 employees, being independently owned and operated, and dominant in its field, and not characterized by many innovative practices. Small business owners tend not to manage particularly aggressively, and they expect normal, moderate sales, profits, and growth. In contrast, an entrepreneurial venture has growth and high profitability as primary objectives. Entrepreneurs manage aggressively and develop innovative strategies, practices, and products. They and their financial backers usually seek rapid growth, immediate and high profits, and sometimes a quick sellout with large capital gains. Simply put, entrepreneurs generate new ideas and turn them into business ventures. But entrepreneurship is not simple, and it is frequently misunderstood. Okay, here's some little myths. We're going to start just to get us start thinking about myths and realities of this important career option. Some myths about entrepreneurs. Myth 1. Anyone can start a business. Reality, the easiest part is starting up. What is hardest is surviving, sustaining, and building a venture so its founders can realize a harvest. Perhaps only 1 in 10 to 20 new businesses that survive 5 years or more results in a capital gain for the founders. Myth 2. Entrepreneurs are gamblers. Reality, successful entrepreneurs take very careful, calculated risks. They try to influence the odds, often by getting others to share risk with them and by avoiding or minimizing risks if they have the choice. They do not deliberately seek to take more risk or to take unnecessary risk, nor do they shy away from unavoidable risk. Myth 3. Entrepreneurs want the whole show to themselves. Reality, it is extremely difficult to grow a higher potential venture by working single-handedly. Higher potential entrepreneurs build a team, an organization, and a company. Besides, 100% of nothing is nothing. So rather than taking a large piece of the pie, they work to make the pie bigger. Myth 4. Entrepreneurs are their own bosses and completely independent. Reality. Entrepreneurs are far from independent and have to serve many masters and constituencies, including partners, investors, customers, suppliers, creditors, employees, families, and those involved in social and community obligations. Yeah, which reminds me, I just had a good friend of mine drop by the other day, a guy I've known since we were boys, he's a business owner, and we were talking a little bit about entrepreneurship. And along these lines, entrepreneurs are their own bosses. He likes to. I thought this was a kind of a clever way to think about it. But yeah, he's like puts. Oh shoot! The way he puts it is, he says he's got a new boss every week. So yeah, that's you're not your own boss, man. You get a new boss with every new job you get. So you know what I'm saying. Anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting take on things. Shout out to Spearman Siding and Construction, Rob Spearman. Great man. Just want to thank him for helping me out yesterday. Okay, so where are we going here? Myth 5, entrepreneurs work longer and harder than many in big companies. Reality, there is no evidence that all entrepreneurs work more than their corporate counterparts. Some do, some do not. Some actually report that they work less. Myth 6, entrepreneurs experience a great deal of stress and pay a high price. Reality, no doubt about it. Being an entrepreneur is stressful and demanding, but there is no evidence that it is any more stressful than numerous other highly demanding professional roles. And entrepreneurs find their jobs very satisfying. They have a high sense of accomplishment, are healthier, and are much less likely to retire than those who work for others. 3 times as many entrepreneurs as corporate managers say they plan to never retire. If you're doing what you love, why retire, you know? So there you go. That's kind of the philosophy, I suppose. Everybody's, I know this is getting played, but everybody talks about, follow your passion. But there's it's kind of cliche, but there's actually a lot of truth to that. You can follow your passion, do what you love, and somehow make a living doing it. Then, hey, who needs retirement, right? Okay, I mean, retirement seems boring to me. I don't know about you. What are you gonna do? Drink Mai Tais? Drink Mai Tais on the beach all fucking day? You know how quick I would die if I did that? To me, that's just like you're counting the days till you're dead or something. You know, gotta be out there, man, mixing it up with the people. Okay. Myth 7, starting a business is risky and often ends in failure. Reality, talented and experienced entrepreneurs. Wait a minute. Okay, yeah, talented and experienced entrepreneurs, because they pursue attractive opportunities and are able to attract the right people and necessary financial and other resources to make the venture work, often head successful ventures. Myth 8. Entrepreneurs are motivated solely by the quest for the almighty dollar. Reality. Entrepreneurs seeking high potential ventures are more driven by building enterprises and realizing long-term capital gains than by instant gratification through high salaries and perks. A sense of personal achievement and accomplishment, feeling in control of their own destinies, and realizing their vision and dreams are also powerful motivators. Money is viewed as a tool and a way of keeping score. Myth 9. Entrepreneurs seek power and control over others. Reality. Successful entrepreneurs are driven by the quest for responsibility, achievement, and results, rather than for power for its own sake. They thrive on a sense of accomplishment and of outperforming the competition, rather than a personal need for power. Power expressed by dominating and controlling others. By virtue of their accomplishments, they may be powerful and influential, but these are more the byproducts of the entrepreneurial process than a driving force behind it. Myth 10. If an entrepreneur is talented, success will happen in a year or two. Reality. An old maxim among venture capitalists says it all. The lemons ripen in 2.5 years, but the pearls take 7 or 8. Rarely is a new business established solidly in less than 3 or 4 years. Myth 11. Any entrepreneur with a good idea can raise venture capital. Reality. Of the ventures of entrepreneurs with good ideas who seek out venture capital, only 1 to 3 out of 100 are funded. Myth 12. If an entrepreneur has enough startup capital, he or she can't miss. Reality. The opposite is often true. That is, too much money at the outset often creates euphoria and a spoiled child syndrome. The accompanying lack of discipline and impulsive spending usually lead to serious problems and failure. Myth 13. Entrepreneurs are lone wolves and cannot work with others. Reality. The most successful entrepreneurs are leaders who build great teams and effective relationships working with peers, directors, investors, key customers, key suppliers, and the like. Myth 14. Unless you attained a 600 plus on your SATs or GMATs, you'll never be a successful entrepreneur. Reality. Entrepreneurial IQ is a unique combination of creativity, motivation, integrity, leadership, team building, analytical ability, and ability to deal with ambiguity and adversity. That is so true. There's a lot of really good entrepreneurs out there that didn't do so hot in school, only because they had, for whatever reason, a lot of them had learning disabilities or whatever, but they were good hustlers. Entrepreneurial IQ, is not necessarily IQ as we all would, but so a lot of times, these people who are forced, sometimes people are kind of forced to become entrepreneurs, and as long as they have the work the work ethic and the tenacity, and they keep working at something, even though they might have had a little trouble in school, like it says here, it's all about it's a combination of creativity, motivation. I'll just take it from the top and read it over again. This is really good. Entrepreneurial IQ is a unique combination of creativity, motivation, integrity, leadership, team building, analytical building, and ability to deal with ambiguity and adversity. You do not have to be a genius per se, but anyway, moving on. Here's another myth not in the table. Being an entrepreneur is great because you can get rich quick and enjoy a lot of leisure time while your employees run the company. But the reality is much more difficult. You must have incredible mental toughness to survive, let alone thrive. During the startup, you're likely to have a lot of bad days. It is exhausting. Even if you do not have employees, you should expect communication breakdowns and other people problems with agents, vendors, distributors, family, subcontractors, lenders, whomever. Dan Brackland, the founder of VisiCale, advises that the most important thing to remember is this: you are not your business. And I quote, "You are not your business. On those darkest days when things aren't going so well, and trust me, you will have them, try to remember that your company's failures don't make you an awful person. Likewise, your company's successes don't make you a genius or superhuman." End quote. So, as you read or as you listen to the next couple sections we're going to be talking about, You're going to learn about two primary sources of new venture creation: independent entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship. Independent entrepreneurship occurs when an individual establishes a new organization without the benefit of corporate support. Intrapreneurs are new venture creators working in big corporations. They are corporate entrepreneurs. Yeah, that's right. So you caught me reading straight from the blog here. And by the way, I'm not plagiarizing. It's from my blog. If you want to go check that out, highly recommend it. Yeah, just kind of follow along with the show. Sometimes I have images that I created and exhibits and stuff that I don't really translate very well over the radio. But so just get on that. Yeah, just go to charleslamson.blogspot.com, charleslamson.blogspot.com. Look on the right there. You can see how everything's divided up into years. And for the particular thing I'm reading right now, it's a big multi-part analysis I did of a book called Managing for Competitive Advantage. Anyway, so yeah, if you want to follow along, yeah, just try to look up November 10th, 2019. Or just put that in the little search bar and it'll take you right to where I'm at. But right now, let's move on. New Ventures Part B. Independent entrepreneurs. Our discussion of independent entrepreneurs will answer questions about why people start their own businesses, the role of the economic environment, what kind of business a person should start, what it takes to be successful, planning and decision making, and the hazards of entrepreneurship. Why become an independent entrepreneur? Bill Gross has started dozens of companies. When he was a boy, he devised homemade electric games and sold candy for a profit to friends. In college, he built and sold plans for a solar heating device, started a stereo equipment company, and sold a software product to Lotus. In 1991, he sold his educational software company for almost $100 million. And in 1996, he started Idea Lab, which hatched dozens of startups on the internet. Why do Bill Gross and other entrepreneurs do what they do? Entrepreneurs start their own firms because of the challenge, the profit potential, and the enormous satisfaction they hope lies ahead. People starting their own business are seeking a better quality of life than they might have in big companies. They seek independence and a feeling of being part of the action. They feel tremendous satisfaction in building something from nothing, seeing it succeed, and watching the market embrace their ideas and products. In addition, people start their own companies when they see their progress blocked at big corporations. When people are laid off, they often try to start businesses of their own. And when employed, people believe there is no promotion in the future, or are frustrated by bureaucracy or other features of corporate life. They may quit and become entrepreneurs. New immigrants may find existing paths to economic success closed to them. Blocked from conventional means of advancement, these newcomers turn to the alternative paths entrepreneurship provides. For example, the Cuban community in Miami has produced many entrepreneurs, as has the Vietnamese community throughout the United States. The role of the economic environment. Money is a critical resource for all new businesses. Increases in the money supply and the supply of bank loans, real economic growth, and improved stock market performance lead to both improved prospects and increased sources of capital. In turn, the prospects and the capital increase the rate. In turn, the prospects and the capital increase the rate of business formation. Under favorable conditions, many aspiring entrepreneurs find early success. But economic dictate that favorable conditions will change. Economics dictates that favorable conditions will change. So, to succeed, entrepreneurs must have the foresight and talent to survive when the environment becomes more hostile. For example, the internet was called a gold rush and a land grab, with space claimed by whoever got there first. Profits were irrelevant, but traditional bricks and mortar companies got serious about the net and started making the transition to bricks and clicks companies that took on the upstart. In 2000, the money for .coms dried up, performance pressure rose, and many high-flying .coms failed. Strategy, cost, and profit, or generally good management, are paramount once again. Although good economic times may make it easier to start a company and to survive, bad times can offer an opportunity to expand. Steve Jobs loved to innovate and introduce new products while competitors cut back. When Howard Schultz had 17 Starbucks stores, he aggressively expanded when the economy started slowing. When the economy came back, his brand was everywhere. It is also easier to recruit talent during downtimes. Sometimes areas with weak economies but potential for growth are overlooked by entrepreneurs. But those who understand the potential can achieve business success. Business incubators. The need to provide a nurturing environment for fledgling enterprises has led to the creation of business incubators. Business incubators, often located in industrial parks or abandoned factories, are protected environments for new small businesses. Incubators offer benefits such as low rents and shared costs. Shared staff costs, such as for receptionists and secretaries, avoid the expense of a full-time employee, but still provide convenient access to services. The staff manager is usually an experienced business person or consultant who advises the new business owners. Incubators often are associated with universities, which provide technical and business services for the new companies. The most amazing region for startups is Silicon Valley. Local universities, particularly Stanford, great talent, pioneering successes, and then venture capitalists and a complete tech infrastructure characterized by a risk-taking culture have made the Valley an exceptional environment for incubating ideas and companies. Other regions including Boston, North Carolina's Research Triangle Park, and Austin have tried to emulate the Valley's success. Other regions in the world followed suit. Government money and tax breaks helped Taiwan's Hsinchu science-based industrial park flourish. The Multimedia Super Corridor MSc program was officially inaugurated by the fourth Malaysian Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamad, on February 12, 1996. The establishment of the MSc program was crucial to accelerate the objectives of Vision 2020 and to transform Malaysia into a modern state by 2020. So here we are in 2020. All right, this, I guess it's a little. Well, I'm going to move on with this, but with the adoption of a knowledge, it's a little. I guess you could say it's debatable whether or not they've reached this goal or not. But Vision 2020 and to transform Malaysia into a modern state by 2020, with the adoption of a knowledge-based society framework. Talking about the Senchu Science Park. Okay, Cyberjaya is the intelligent city at the center of the super corridor. To entice corporations, the Malaysian government dedicated a 15 by 50 kilometer zone, promised to leave 2/3 of it undeveloped, gave state tax exemptions, offer unlimited duty-free importation of multimedia equipment, allowed unrestricted numbers of foreign knowledge workers to enter the country, and promised not to censor the internet. Sun Microsystems, Oracle, Microsoft, and Nippon Telegraph and Telephone Corporation were among the first to sign on. However, after the government invested several billion in the project, the economic crisis came and undermined the park. Now there are few foreign companies and only a few dozen homegrown companies, and the project has not come close to achieving its vision. Cyberjaya, a rising or a setting sun? Well, only time will tell, ladies and gentlemen. What business should you start? You need a good idea, and you need to find or create a good opportunity. The idea. Many entrepreneurs and observers say that in contemplating your business, you must start with a great idea, a great product, an untapped market, and good timing are essential ingredients in any recipe for success. Many great organizations have been built based on a different kind of idea. The founders desire to build a great organization rather than to offer a particular product. Bill Hewlett and David Packard decided to start a company and then figure out what to make. J. Willard Marriott knew he wanted to be in business for himself, but didn't have a product in mind until he opened an A&W root beer stand. Masaru Ibuka had no specific product idea when he founded Sony in 1945. Sony's first product attempt, a rice cooker, didn't work, and its first product, a tape recorder, didn't sell. The company stayed alive by making and selling crude heating pads. Many now great companies had early failures, but the founders persisted. They believed in themselves and in their dreams of building great organizations. Whereas conventional logic is to see the company as a vehicle for your products, this perspective sees the products as a vehicle for your company. Be prepared to kill or revise an idea, but never give up on your company. This has been a prescription for success for many great entrepreneurs and business leaders. Okay, think about Sony, Disney, Hewlett-Packard, Procter & Gamble, IBM, and Walmart. Their founders' greatest achievements, their greatest ideas are their organizations. The opportunity. Entrepreneurs spot, create, and exploit opportunities in a variety of ways. Jay Mueller spotted an opportunity while touring Europe on a concert tour. The German rock musician missed some important faxes while moving from hotel to hotel. He put his recording career on hold. He still records periodically, and hired some programmers to develop software that can compress faxes into files and send them to internet email addresses. The company took off. Java, the internet programming language, was designed to be safe and was widely perceived to be safe when it first appeared. Ben Shlomo Tubal saw it differently. When he talked about his plans to market a Java security product, people scoffed. Alone, he worked to develop a product that would protect companies from hostile programs embedded in the Java code. When some Princeton scientists subsequently found ways in which hackers could exploit Java's weak spots, Tobul was ready and far ahead of any would-be competitors. Tobul foresaw the probability that hackers would try to exploit Java's weaknesses, so he developed a product to protect the programs. To spot opportunities, think carefully about events and trends as they unfold. Consider, for example, technological discoveries, startups in biotechnology, microcomputers, nanotechnology, and nanotechnology follow. All right. Demographic changes. Startups have capitalized on new clothing and music trends, desire for fast food, and growing interest in sports. Economic dislocations, such as booms or failures. The oil boycott spawned new drilling firms. The steel industry collapse was accompanied by many mill startups. Calamities, such as wars and natural disasters. Mount St. Helens eruption spawned new tourism companies. Andrew Higgins's business expanded from wooden boats for the Louisiana swamps to the design and mass production of landing vehicles that carried infantry ashore in World War II. Physionics really took off in late 2001. The company makes biometric software that matches video images to a database of facial measurements in order to identify anyone from runaways to shoplifters to terrorists. Rule changes by government. Environmental legislation created opportunities for new consulting firms and cleanup machinery firms. The Small Business Innovation Research Program underwrote new product innovation firms. Deregulation spawned new airlines and trucking companies. The next frontiers for entrepreneurship, where did they lie? Throughout history, aspiring entrepreneurs have asked this question. 4 of the industries that look most exciting over the next 10 to 20 years are financial services, health services and health-related things, travel, and education. And all 4 are really based on the continuing aging of the baby boomers. I keep a list of new business ideas. Right now, there are about 70 ideas on it. Add biotech, Eastern Europe, nanotechnology, oceanography. Make your own list. It's fun. One fascinating opportunity for entrepreneurs is outer space. Historically, the space market was driven by the government and was dominated by big players like Boeing and Lockheed Martin. But now, with huge demand for satellite launches and potential profits skyrocketing, smaller entrepreneurs are entering the field. New ventures in space include satellites for automobile navigation, tracking trucking fleets, and monitoring flow rates and leaks in pipelines, testing designer drugs in the near-zero gravity environment, and using remote sensing to monitor global warming, spot fish concentrations, and detect crop stress for precision farming. And think about this. Instead of the government funding, managing, and implementing Mars travel, one possibility is that it will offer a $20 billion prize to the winner of a private company race to the red planet. Get your ass to Mars. The ability for entrepreneurs in the space industry are huge. Space startups require hundreds of millions of dollars to ramp up. They are highly unlikely to be profitable. Most investors steer clear of them, and most will fail miserably. But the entrepreneurs believe that the challenges are merely financial rather than technical, and that whoever pulls it off will change the world. Side streets. There also exists a useful role for trial and error. Some entrepreneurs start their enterprises and then let the market decide whether it likes their ideas or not. This is risky, of course, and should be done only if you can afford the risks. But even if the original idea does not work, you may be able to capitalize on the side street effect. As you head down the road, you come to unknown places and unexpected opportunities begin to appear. And while you are looking, prepare so you are able to act quickly and effectively on the opportunity when it does present itself. What does it take to be successful? Many people assume there exists an entrepreneurial personality. There is no single personality type that predicts entrepreneurial success, but you are more likely to succeed as an entrepreneur if you exhibit certain characteristics. The following characteristics contribute to entrepreneurs' success. 1. Commitment and determination. Successful entrepreneurs are decisive, tenacious, disciplined, willing to sacrifice, and able to immerse themselves totally in their enterprise. You have to have a true vision for what you're doing, says Dan Bricklin, the founder of Visicale. 2. Leadership. They are self-starters, team builders, superior learners, and teachers. 3. Opportunity obsession. They have an intimate knowledge of customers' needs, are market-driven, and are obsessed with value creation and enhancement. 4. Tolerance of risk, ambiguity, and uncertainty. They are calculated risk takers and risk managers, tolerance of stress, and able to resolve problems. 5. Creativity, self-reliance, and ability to adapt. They are open-minded, restless with the status quo, able to learn quickly, highly adaptable, creative, skilled at conceptualizing, and attentive to detail. Motivation to excel. They have a clear results orientation, set high but realistic goals, have a strong drive to achieve, know their own weaknesses and strengths, and focus on what can be done rather than on the reasons things can't be done. Making good choices. Success is a function not only of personal characteristics. Success is a function not only of personal characteristics, but also of making good choices about the business you start. Okay. So, all right. The new venture may involve high or low levels of innovation or the creation of something new and different. It can also be characterized by low or high risk. Risk refers primarily to the probability of a major financial loss. But it also is more than that. It is psychological risk as perceived by the entrepreneur, including risk to reputation. Risk to reputation and ego. I have no idea what that word is that I wrote there. But anyway, okay, so I create the reason I'm kind of hemming and hawing here is I created a table. So once again, you might want to go to the blog and check that out. I don't think it'll translate very well over the radio because you can't see what I'm talking about. So, all right, moving on. Come on. Let me enough of that. Okay. All right, moving on. Moving on. From town to town. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on up. Come on, come on up. Come on, come on up. Come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on, come on, baby. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, baby. Come on, come on, come on. All right. So here we go. So ladies and gentlemen, you might really want to take a look at this because I'm still talking about new ventures. And I'm going to be talking about planning. The reason I'm thinking you might really want to go check this out because I have an outline here on how to create a plan, how to create a plan. It would really behoove you to go back to go to the site charleslamson.blogtalkradio.com and then go back to the date November 14th 2019. Like I said, I think the fastest way to get there is just go to the site and in the little search bar, the little search field, just type in November 14th, 2019. It'll take you straight here. But I'm going to try and describe what I'm talking about without having to show you a visual. So you think you have spotted a business opportunity and you have the personal potential to make it a success. Now what? Should you act on your idea? Where should you begin? The business plan. Your excitement and intuition may convince you that you are onto something, but they might not convince anyone else. You will need more thorough planning and analysis. The business plan is extremely, extremely important. So this will help convince other people to get on board and help you avoid costly mistakes. The first formal planning step is to do an opportunity analysis. An opportunity analysis includes a description of the product or service, an assessment of the opportunity, an assessment of the entrepreneur, you, specification of activities and resources needed to translate your idea into a viable business, and your sources of capital. Here are some questions you should answer in your opportunity analysis. Once again, I put all this in table form, I highly recommend going to look at it. But like I said, just go to charleslamson.blogspot.com and look for this date, November 14th, 2019. There's some good, if you're really interested on how to make a business plan, there's some really good tables and visuals there for you to look at. There's even a really good outline for how to create a business plan. But let's talk a little bit about this table one I created. Okay, it shows the questions you should answer in an opportunity analysis. Okay, what market need does my idea fill? What personal observations have I experienced or recorded with regard to that market need? What social condition underlies this market need? What market research data can be marshaled to describe this market need? What patents might be available to fulfill this need? What competition exists in this market? How would I describe the behavior of the competition? What does the international market look like? What does the international competition look like? Where is the money to be made in this activity? It's very important to answer these questions, put it all in writing. This is an extremely good way to start getting your business plan down on paper, which is very important if you're looking for some startup money, or or if you want to try and get others on board with what you're doing. The business plan is extremely important. The opportunity analysis or opportunity assessment plan focuses on the opportunity, not the entire venture. It provides the basis for making a decision on whether to act. Then the business plan describes all the elements involved in starting the new venture. The business plan describes the venture and its market strategies and future directions. It often has functional plans for marketing, finance, manufacturing, and human resources. So, once again, I created another table, and it shows. So just just check out that blog, and this again. I'm gonna say this one more time because it's extremely important that you get the outline for this business plan. So that's November 14th, 2019 at the blog, charleslanson.blogspot.com. So I created a table there. Yeah, it tells you everything you need to know about how, it's a great outline of a business plan, if I do not say so myself. But all right. Tells you everything you need to know in creating your own business plan. And it's a lot of work, but you got to do it. You got to get that done. So, key planning elements. Most business plans devote so much attention to financial projections, but plus it just helps you get a good mental picture in your mind too of what your business is going to be like, how it's going to run, how you're going to make your money, how you're going to get money from your customers, that kind of thing. So it's just vitally important. It just really helps in the vision process. Okay, well, anyway, it's the end of the big show, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, don't take any wooden nickels. And all of you people watching on YouTube, same to you. Don't take any wooden nickels. Thanks for tuning in. Stay out of trouble, folks.